Let's talk about a couple things in InDesign, such as text within a shape, which I don't have here, but I will do, and then actual image boxes. First off, images in boxes. Now, here I have an image, which is this box. And to move this image, I'm going to use the selection tool. Now, what I have done is I have turned off this option. Let me see where that is. I think it's under View, Extras, and there is this weird little content grabber. It looks like a circle in there. That content grabber can give you guys a lot of problems because what it does is it moves the item or the scan within the bounding box. So it looks like you have two boxes. You see how it turns into the hand, like a hand tool. So that's what that's about. Now I turn content grabber off, which I forgot to mention in another video because it's a preference that stays off while I'm working in InDesign. In essence, what that content grabber is the same thing as the direct selection tool. The direct selection tool is what I use to move the scan within the bounding box. Okay, so the scan is actually the size of this particular box, and the bounding box that is in is this blue box. And the reason why it's blue is because it's on a layer that's blue. So let me put that back. So the content grabber to me is just a little bit of a problem. Now another thing, if you double click on an image, it automatically turns into a content grabber. So you have to be careful about single clicking or double clicking. So if you just wanted to move the box and not the contents within the box, make sure you're not on content grabber, which is dead center. If you don't want to turn content grabber off, you just click somewhere other than dead center. It'll move both the bounding box and the item in the box. Okay? But if you want to turn content grabber off because it's giving you fits, that's under View, Extras, and Hide Content Grabber. Okay? Now, no matter where I click on this image, even if it's a center, assuming it's a single click, I can move the graphic. Again, a double click moves the graphic within the box. So I wanted to clear that up. That's become a frustration for a lot of people. I'm going to move him back over here, roughly in his position. Now, I'm actually using my arrow tool to move the cursor, or to move the ox over. And if you hold down the Shift key and use the arrow tool, it moves it in larger increments. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about, and this isn't going to be a real pretty thing that I'm doing, but I want to talk about putting type within a shape. So that's a completely different thing than a text wrap. So let's say I have a shape. I'm going to create a custom shape with the pen tool. Let me find the pen tool. There it is. I'm going to create a couple of custom shapes. So let's say I have this hourglass. Now I'm going to keep it real simple, folks, just to try to get this to go really quickly. I've been using this pen tool for a few years, so if you are not familiar with the pen tool, it can be quite a bear to try to master, but after a while you can get a pretty good grasp of it. Again, this is probably something I should explain in detail, how to use one of these pen tools a little bit later. So for now I'm just going to make probably a pretty wonky hourglass. Looks like I got an email from John. Okay. Close that. There we go. Now that's not the prettiest thing ever, but it is an hourglass shape. Now it went ahead and filled with this color because the last thing I had selected was that color. So I could tell it to, when I go to swatches, tell it to be filled with nothing and stroked with nothing. So it kind of remembered the last fill and stroke of something I worked on. If I click on it, both of these should be none. Now in order to get text within an object, I can go to File and Place and go find my text. Now I believe I've got mine on my Macintosh in my type class, and see if I have some body copy here. I may or may not. I think I was using just dummy text. So I would go find the body copy and I would then place it into this box. So how I would do that is if you click on this box with the type tool and it's actually clicking on the object versus the box. Now, I'm just going to fill it with placeholder text. Now I can fill that entire shape with placeholder text. Okay? Now the problem with this is this side looks nice and contoured to this edge. This side is ragged left, or ragged right, excuse me. Let me move this over to the artboard, or off of the artboard and onto the design. That way when I hit the W key, you'll see how this edge doesn't look as clean as that edge. Okay? So what I want to do is, usually when I do a text wrap, or not a text wrap, text inside of a shape, I will go to my paragraph control panel and I will justify it. There we go. Usually it's justified with the last line left. Okay, the only problem is you may not have enough copy here. So I may have to fill that again with placeholder text now that I have that justified. So that way it'll fill nicely. Again, we would have real text in here. But it still ends at the, so it's flush left. Now, I rarely, if ever, use the justify with last line center. It just usually doesn't look good. And then there's justify all lines, which will force justify that bottom line. Okay? So that might actually look better. Alright, so if I were to bring this over, let me move this copy here so we can get it out of the way. If I were to bring this over, hit the W key for the preview, you can see that that shape is much nicer than what I had before. So that's text within a shape. Now if, let's say you had a big symbol, such as this that I drew, I actually drew that in InDesign, and you wanted text within this area here, you might actually have to draw that shape. I'll probably just draw it as a triangle because, oops, I don't really need it, well, especially the top, you want it to be nice and flat, because type doesn't necessarily want to be in a curvy line up there. Now I will have it curved slightly around this area. There we go. Now I'm going to fill that with none and stroke it with nothing. And I can now, with my type tool, click in that shape and I can type things in there. Okay, I know this is not real type, but you can see, or I could fill it with placeholder text. There we go. Let me delete it and then go to fill with placeholder text. There we go. And again, with a shape like this, it's probably best to justify it. The only problem is this shape is much too small for that type, and you've got lots of rivers. Lots of really awkward space between some of the words. So rivers are not always, well, they're never good, so we would have to modify that. Okay, so I just covered not text wrap, but text inside of a shape. And I did it in a way that it's successful, for the most part. I could reduce this type size down a bit, and it would fit a little bit nicer. And so if your type is not working well, maybe reduce it down. You don't want to reduce it down much any smaller than 9 points. There we go, fill it with placeholder text. Now we can see that it's a little bit better. Okay, so it's text within a shape. You just have to draw the shape. You have to draw a shape over a shape even. Just make sure it's filled with nothing and stroked with nothing. Now let me show you a bad choice as far as working with text in a shape. You don't want your text to jump across items. So let's say I draw a shape of an oxen. Okay, now this is not going to be very good. I can tell you that right now. See, here's an oxen. Here's his ears. He's got these big old horns. And again, this should be filled and stroked with nothing. It's kind of confusing because it's filled right now with stuff. Let me make it fill of none. There we go. Now we can see this outer edge of this oxen. Now again, this is not very good, folks. There's his other ear, here's his nose, and so on. So, I draw the body of this oxen. Let me do his feet down here. I'm just going to rush right through this. It doesn't matter really what the quality is right now because it's just not going to work what I'm about ready to do. So, You know, if I were focused on this being real, I'll just give him one leg just to make it quicker. And I would normally put a tail on him. But this is the kind of shape that doesn't work very well for text inside of it. Now, what I mean by that, I can click anywhere inside of here, and this will turn into a type box. And I'm going to go ahead and I'll make this 9 point because that was working out pretty well. I'm going to go to type and fill it with placeholder text. And here we go. Now, I'm going to probably want to justify that again. And this has a lot of paragraph breaks, and this is a huge amount of copy. We only have 100 words. Now what's happening here is this text starts here, and you would assume you'd read down and then across here and keep going. But what it does is it starts here and then it jumps. Well, it looks like it doesn't jump until we get to the second line. Then you go udu ve lesk, yeah, and it's like, what? Nobody reads like this. Same thing here at the legs. It goes from this sentence, and instead of reading down the leg, because we're used to reading in columns, excuse me, let me zoom out. Instead of reading down the leg, we're reading across this, then back, then across, then back, then across. And it seems like these are columns, but you're actually breaking. So you don't want to use imagery or shapes where the text breaks across one column, well, it's not really a column, one area to another. It really confuses the readers. So this kind of shape is no good, whereas this kind of shape works because the text isn't breaking any planes. You know, it's all contained, and it's working fine. Same thing with this triangle. So you can have somewhat complicated shapes, but you can't have things that run up vertically where the text has to jump over. That's not really a good use of a text inside of a shape. Now I'm going to delete all this text here. Double click on it, then hit delete key. I'm going to fill this back with a color. Let me fill it versus stroke it. There we go. Oh, I'm on the type tool. Okay, let's do it this way. There we go. Now, I suppose if you wanted to put text inside of this, you could draw a separate text box or a separate shape. Maybe I'll just use the type tool, and I will draw a text box away from it because right now it's selected. And then I can fill that with placeholder text. And I can then position this within that area of where I could put, you know, text in his body. So that might be a decent solution to that problem. If you want text in a really complicated shape, only put it in the bulk of the area of where people, or of the object. Okay, I think that's all I need to cover to clarify a couple things in InDesign. Hopefully you found this video useful, and I know it can be really frustrating working in InDesign, but you'll eventually get the hang of it. It just takes time. Thanks.